I've never considered violence an option, but
I
I'm considering violence.
I'm watching your reaction now. Screw the show. Your reaction's priceless.
Yep. You choose what, Jed?
Never thought violence was something warranted after destroying a IP, but I'm feeling violent tendencies right now.
We have nothing sacred anymore.
Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I just finished Netflix's Witcher Blood Origin, and I had some really low expectations going to this whole affair, and I've got to say, I was very, very, very surprised to have those expectations entirely subverted. It was far worse than even I had predicted. I didn't think that was going to be possible. I thought I'd at least get a year before I got a show that was worse than Rings of Power. I thought I'd have at least a little bit of a buffer between Rings of Power and another travesty of that level. Blood Origin is far worse than even Rings of Power, and that's irregardless of the lore aspect. Just from the basic storytelling and wokeness aspect, it was far worse than that. I am a big lore expert, but I do want to try to keep this review focused primarily on the writing of the show. There will be some lore stuff occasionally, but the majority of it I'll leave for a later date. It's just horrifically bad, more than enough material just to talk about the writing involved, the production involved. There's just nothing good about this. I've never seen a production that was broken on so many different levels. Even the CGI, the cinematography, the editing, there's so little actual value in this entire product that it's insane to see that something like this was approved. I'm usually someone who prefers less government just in general, but I think a act of Congress needs to be passed to prevent these writers from Netflix from ever touching another creative property again, from ever writing anything again, because this is offensive. I was saying it as a joke for my live stream thumbnail, but this might be a breach of the Geneva Convention torture clauses because, wow, it was painful to get through. When watching it with Mustang Rider and Dermy Wormy live together, we counted up to 23, maybe even 24 franchises that this show ripped off of, but no Witcher. They'd rather steal from 23 other franchises than actually steal from the one franchise that they have rights to, the one franchise that they should be stealing from. Even if Bo DeMeo was not right when he said that they actively vocally mock the source material, decisions like this show and every decision made inside of it, creatively, story-wise, is actively mocking the source material to levels that even I couldn't have predicted. If Henry Cavill had watched Blood Origin, it would have been more than enough of a legitimate motivation for him to leave the franchise forever because of how thoroughly debased they approached it. I've never seen anything as horrifically bad as Blood Origin, and it's not surprising that the audience is also standing up for something like this, where it currently, at the time of recording this video, sits at a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes and similar scores across IMDb, Metacritic, and all the other platforms. It is just really impressive to see how horrific it is and how the fans are standing up to it, because it is one of the worst shows ever made. I can't harp on that enough. I've never given a show below a 2 out of 10 as far as I can remember, but this show is going to get a score in the end far, far below, even below those low standards. But before I get any further, there will be spoilers ahead, so spoiler alert. Witcher Blood Origin follows Princess Mira, who does not wish to be sold away in an arranged marriage to end a 1,000-year war, so she slaughters the entire leadership of all 3 elven kingdoms with the help of Baelor and a monster he's procured from another universe. 7 heroes unite in opposition to now Empress Mirin. These 7 heroes must find a way to defeat the first monster the continent has ever seen, with the creation of the first Witcher. I just want to get the positives out of the way right out the front here. And one of the positives is just slightly less bad than what they originally were planning. I gotta say, the music is good. The music is strong. It's the one thing that I was like, all right, I can see some talent there. Bear McCreary did the composition for this show, and he's done other stuff like Black Flag and other great stuff like that. So he is a talented composer, and you can see that bleeding through sometimes. It's not always apparent, but there's at least something there that I had to mention as being a positive addition to the show. And the other positive is more, like I said, kind of a less bad thing than an actual positive thing. Because months ago, we knew that the prologue for Blood Origin was going to see Jaskier singing in the tavern, singing the true story of the history of the conjunction of the spheres from the books, and then Minnie Driver's character would come up to him and say, no, you're wrong, that's not what happened, it's actually this, and then she'd proceed to narrate into the events of Blood Origin. And they made it a little bit better. At least he wasn't telling the 8-book accurate story. He was in the middle of a Scoia'tael battle against the Temerian army, and everything just froze, and then Minnie Driver did her thing anyway. So the battle was a slight improvement than him just singing the true story, but only minorly so, because as I predicted several months ago, they did indeed use Jaskier to weaponize him against the fans, just like they did in Season 2, when they had a dock worker say, hey Jaskier, you know that timeline stuff you did in your first ballad about Season 1? It was really confusing, that was dumb, why did you do that? And then Jaskier just went, oh, maybe you're just not smart enough to understand it, mocking the fans through Jaskier. They did that once again because when he heard that the first Witcher was actually an elf, which is not canonical, he said, ooh, Geralt's gonna get so mad when he hears this. That's exactly how fans would respond, because that's not actually what happened. Witchers were created exclusively by humans to fight the monster problem, and neither monsters nor humans arrived until after the conjunction of the spheres. So how could both of these events take place prior to the conjunction? Oh, they just looked at like a timeline, and they're like, ooh, it said Witcher here, this word here, and it said monsters here in conjunction of the spheres in a wiki, and they just like slammed it all into a single month. They spread over 2,000 years of history into 1 month. Some of the stuff needs time to breathe for it to make any sense. They include Laura Dern's origin story, changing her parent from being King Oberon. King Oberon's not even in the show, the primary villain from the books, to the Lark and Fial Diversity and Inclusion Squad. And it's just really horrendous lore breaking on every single opportunity. And Jaskier is just used to make fun of the fans who would be upset about it. And it doesn't surprise me at all, coming from these Netflix writers. Lauren Histrich and Declan Damara are hacks of untold proportions who do not deserve to touch fantasy or really any other creative property for the rest of their lives for the travesty that they perpetuated with this show and those specific lore breaks above all of the other ones. But I just want to get into the show for a little bit. The story is really rough, and Minnie Driver's voiceover is some of the worst aspects of it. She is completely unnecessary, and she's a great actress, but she is phoning it in majorly, and it's hard to listen to her monotone, single tone, no inflection type just voice that is just telling things that we already know. The show does not understand the difference between show don't tell, at least most of the time, and it just does not trust its audience to figure out things that just happened before them. Like when a monster kills a bunch of kings from a conclave of peace, Minnie Driver comes in and says, with all the kings dead, things would be different now. It's like, no shit. I think the audience can figure out, if a bunch of kings and their entire royal retinues die, that might change things. But no, Minnie has to come in with her monotone voice and go, nothing would ever be the same again. It's just really aggravating. Every time Minnie voice comes over in voiceover, it's really aggravating. And I just can't, I can't handle it. I can't handle it. And they do mention at the beginning a few changes to Jaskier's personality, his interaction with the elves, making him way more elf friend than he was in the books. But whatever, we can talk about that at a later date. Once we actually get into the past and start narrating the events of the show, it's just not what elves are supposed to look like, and even what they choose to do with elves is really boring. There's nothing cool about these elf societies. It's just generic human stuff. It's like, ooh, people think Vikings are cool. Let's put some pointy ears on Vikings. Isn't that cool? And they just like live in the dirt, and it's not really all that exciting whatsoever. And that's the same for all the other kingdoms. All the kingdoms are just homogenized crap. Nothing distinct about the three of them besides their crests, and they all are so incredibly diverse, accent-wise as much as race-wise, to the degree that they're like, even in the same town, even within the same family, you cannot believe these people are related to each other because of how massively diverse everything is. You can go too far with diversity, and this show did it because it destroys any logical sense of immersion or realism in it. If they had like one kingdom that was like this, one kingdom that was like that, accent-wise, if nothing else, they needed to keep the accents consistent. But no, even cousins, a very white-looking Viking dude has a first cousin. They confirmed it's a first cousin who is as black as it can be. That doesn't make sense genetically. And their accents were so far different that they were clearly born on different continents. That doesn't make sense within Witcher lore, whether or not it's from the Netflix show or from the books. And that's something that I did mention in my lore videos a few weeks ago, that Blood Origin might internally work within itself, but it would not work even in relation to the Netflix main Witcher show, let alone the Witcher books. And that's not even the case. It can't even be consistent with itself because it contradicts the show in single episodes. Even information that someone says they have, later on they say they don't have. And it's just so incredibly inconsistent that there are plot holes rampant through all this. There is dialogue that just doesn't work and world building that is asinine to the 9th degree. After we get introduced to these really boring elf societies, we see the lark singing to a tavern, and they originally say this is in the far north of the continent, but later on it's just, oh no, we actually meant it was in Skellige, off in the eastern islands. You know, don't pay attention to that. We just teleported, you know, a few thousand miles. Don't worry about it. And that happens several times. Teleportation is pretty rampant, but that's the clear sign of them not even knowing where they are, and the text contradicting where they say they are in moments later. But she's singing to a crowd, and in front of a giant crowd, they just needed to have that moment of big bad white guy trying to sexually assault a little girl, an underage looking, at least, girl, in front of everybody, just so the lark can be like, ooh, I can hit white men too. It is really aggressively agenda oriented. Even the worst men would not try to sexually assault a young girl like that in front of that big of a crowd. It's just stupid just to have the lark have an action scene. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it comes across as very creepy voyeuristic because of the age of the girl involved in this situation, the actress playing Eithr. It just is really creepy, honestly. It was not necessary for the show, it was not necessary for the lark's character development or Eithr's. It just came across as an excuse for the writer's own prejudices to shine through. And we have a lot of dialogue throughout this entire encounter and throughout the entire show that is just clunky beyond the belief and incredibly modern. There's no such thing as fantasy dialogue. This show, internally, not what the books say it should have taken place at, but the show says it takes place in around 200 AD. They should talk a little bit different than they do in modern times or even medieval times where The Witcher takes place. You should talk a little bit differently. Yeah, it should be a little bit different. In the books, it takes place 200 years before BC. So yeah, it should be a lot different than modern day speak. But no, they're just like, oh, amazing. Some of them even talking like country valley girl accents. The dialogue and delivery is just horrendous, even from the good actresses like Minnie Driver and Michelle Yeoh. It's really unflattering. And that's when we get introduced to the idea of clans. Now, Fjall is in the service of Princess Mirren, and apparently clans, instead of meaning what they've meant for, you know, all of the English language, like a family of independent people who kind of may be wandering tribes, very similar to tribe, instead of meaning that, it just means King's Guard. They just looked up the cool words and it's like cool fantasy words. Ooh, clan's a cool fantasy word. Let's use that instead of not actually using the definition of clan. So apparently clan means King's Guard in this show. There's 3 sets of King's Guard, the Wolf clan, the Raven clan, and the Ghost tribe. I guess they couldn't keep that consistent with clans, but yeah, the Ghost tribe. And they're the King's Guard for the 3 different kingdoms of elven rule in the continent at this time. And Fjall is working for Mirren, saves her life. We get some really bad dialogue between the two of them, romantic and otherwise. It's like, oh, you saved me. No, you saved yourself. Yeah, I'm pretty sure a 5-year-old could write better dialogue than it was in that encounter. And really exemplifying the poor state of modern Hollywood and modern writing is this is par for the course at this point in time. It's just talentless writers getting artificially inflated to positions above their station and writing crap and then using the diversity and inclusion that they incorporated into their shows as a shield against such criticism. There's already been people called racist, sexist, and homophobic for the show for criticizing it, and that's what was always intended by the inclusion of all this diversity, to protect against the ineptitude of these writers' capabilities. It's here that we get a brief scene between the main villain of the series, Baylor, played by Lenny Henry, and boy, he gives a worse performance in this than he does in Rings of Power, and for some reason, he's using monoliths to open portals to other worlds. It's not the case in lore. Monoliths came through with the conjunction. They didn't cause it. They didn't predate it. They even make it dwarvish in this show. Apparently, yeah, the dwarves have magic so good that the elves need to dig it up and be like, oh my god, we gotta use this. No, dwarves did not have multiversal capabilities as far as we know. Elves, at this point, absolutely could travel through the multiverse with ease. They don't need monoliths at this point in time until post-conjunction to travel the multiverse. But apparently, yeah, monoliths are here and they're used for multiversal travel and time travel later, which we'll get into in a moment. But Baylor goes through a portal, ends up in this like desolated world, and that's where he meets what looks like a Jinn. They don't say it's a Jinn, but it looks like a Jinn, and it's manipulating him, trying to give him power, trying to get him to self-sacrifice so he can get chaos magic, forgetting that he's, been using chaos magic the whole time. It's not like magic and chaos magic is different. It's all just magic. Yeah, they can't even keep that straight. But whatever, he wants chaos magic instead, despite him using it this entire show. But we go back to where Fjall and the Lark are. Fjall was banished from his clan and the Princess Mirren's side because he was sleeping with the princess. So he's banished, he's sent away, and he ends up in Skellige for some reason. Just happens to end up exactly where the Lark is imprisoned. She's, eventually got arrested for assaulting those dudes in the pub during her performance that everyone just kind of ignored during the song. And he doesn't commit a crime. No one says he commits a crime. We have no reason why he gets thrown in jail. Oh wait, there is a reason. He needs to meet the Lark. Oh, it's contrived. So many contrivances and coincidences. Oh my god, there's so many. But yeah, they end up in jail together. They end up talking and nothing really happens besides exposition galore. This show is rife with exposition that is unnecessary and clunky as all hell. You just like news position, just like in modern day. Oh, we overhearing this conversation in a tavern that gives you all the information you need to know about the current state of the new Golden Empire. Oh, you killed my sister. Oh no. And it's just really aggressively poorly written. Like, if there is a possible way for someone's inept writing capabilities to physically attack you, this show's script would be the closest to that has ever been put to paper before. And it's just painful, like I said earlier, but they're able to escape. He's got his freedom bought for him, so there's no reason for him to be in prison at all. And the Lark frees herself. She goes back to Ithleen, and there's no reason why they should have a close relationship, Ithleen and Lark. Oh wait, no, they're strong, diverse females. Of course they're friends. But they're really close to each other for some reason, and it just happens that this girl that she made this really random close relationship with is an oracle who prophesizes the conjunction of the spheres and that Lark will be killing a monster soon. Doesn't make sense, very coincidental, and apparently that changes the Lark's mind on a dime. Now she's willing to go back to her clan and fight for her kingdom again, even though that's been diametrically opposed to her entire personality so far. And that's something we see with all the characters in the show, more so with Michelle Yao than any of the others, but nobody's character motivations track in a logical fashion. It's basically like, no, I don't want to. Well, but what if you did want to? Oh, you're right, let's go. There's no logical progression. There's no arcs. There's not a single arc in this entire show. It really is very poorly done. Moving on to some of the technical aspects of this show, there's a lot of it that is very poorly done. From the editing, janky, shaky cam close-up that doesn't make any sense, to weird CGI that is just really, really bad considering the budget of these Witcher shows, and the designs. There's nothing design unique about any of the costumes, about any of the set locations. Nothing in the show really stands out as its own artistic style. It is just at best generic and at worst horrendous, like what the hell were you thinking? There's nothing of quality in the design. Even in the hair and makeup, they kept doing some really weird stuff. And the primary monsters throughout the show, there's two of them. They're just like, ooh, giant centipede or giant dragonfly blob that has tails that shoot out laser bolts that turn people into red dust. And it's just like, that's it. It's really pathetic. They're opposed entirely of using any actual mythological creatures or any creatures that were actually in the Witcher canon. That's something we saw in Witcher Season 2 as well, is that they'd rather make up a monster, bring in another monster from another universe, than actually use the monsters that were at their disposal. It's a weird thing that I don't understand what the motivations for it is, but they just refuse to use any known monsters, and it's starting to get a little annoying at this point because I want to see some wyverns, some drachnoids, some griffins, some necrophages. I want to see some of the cool monsters from the Witcher universe, but they're so opposed to it. It's strange. It's very, very strange why they're so opposed to showing monsters in a Monster Hunter show. It's like, it's the main thing that you should be showing. And with that, they're going back to this trope from Game of Thrones season 8, where they just shoot everything so dark. It's become a bit of a trope at this point, like even House of the Dragon, Willow, other shows are doing it as well, where it's just so dark that you can't see anything going on to cover up the poor CGI. Because it is really poor CGI, because when the lights come on and you can actually see what's going on, it just is clear that no time was spent in the CGI room to really make things good. Some locations look like they didn't even have their textures added. Like the exterior of the main palace looks like they forgot to add the textures to the outside wall. It's just flat and white. It's really, really bad CGI, grating on the senses. Normally I don't harp on stuff like that, but on this one it was just that bad that it was too obvious to ignore. It's at this point where we meet Michelle Yeoh, and as I mentioned earlier, she is a phenomenal actress. I love her in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. She's phenomenal, but she's given nothing to work with, and she phones it in entirely. In the first primary fight scene she gets in, she gets hurt so bad and poisoned that she's on the bench for the majority of the rest of the show, to the point where she's just not actively involved in the plot whatsoever, and they're not utilizing the immense skill that she has with weaponry. She is completely wasted in this show, and phones it in, rightfully so. The dialogue between them as they try to convince her to join their cause is just really flat, and then they're flat on top of it. It's just like, hey, you like stuff? Do you want to come? Like, no, I don't want to come. Oh, but what if you did? You know what? I do want to come. Let's go. It's that superficial and poorly written. And one of the things that I was talking about earlier about in-episode contradictions, as they're riding up to her hut that she has, her little pavilion, the Lark tells Fial that she's a member of the Ghost Tribe, and he goes, oh, no, the Ghost Tribe, they're not real, they're legends, they don't actually exist. Alright, apparently they're not known, that people think that they're a legend. But when they actually meet Michelle Yeoh, she accuses his family of butchering her entire tribe. It's like, hey, your father slaughtered my family. And he's like, yeah, and they were right to do so. We should have taken you all out then. He knows the Ghost Tribe exists. He knows that his family wiped them out. So why did he say that they were a legend and doesn't exist just mere moments before? They can't even keep consistent within a few minutes. This is just the worst example of it. There are several other examples of contradictions, coincidences, contrivances. There's just no reason for the dwarf to join their cause. She just like shows up all of a sudden. It's like, hey guys, I'm on your team now. And they don't even have a conversation to explain it. It's just constant, all the worst things in writing, like everything you learn day one of a writing school, all those fallacies, all those contradictions are included in the writing of this show. I cannot harp on it enough. It is so poorly written that it is grating on the senses of even people who aren't familiar with how to actually write anything of quality. It's just that bad. To briefly talk about another lore break that happened during this point in the story, the elves all kind of collectively agree that they don't know what the multiverse is. They're all surprised that the monolith is capable of opening doors to other multiverses. That is false, because the Age of Migration took place about 2,000 years before this time. So there are elves alive who remember the Age of Migration, when the Unadulterated elves, their ancestors, came over from their homeworld that was destroyed to the continent. There are elves alive at this time who traveled in the multiverse, immigrated from a destroyed planet to this world. Absolutely, every elf should know for a fact that the multiverse is a thing, but they all just suddenly forget, as if the writers don't actually know the lore. Oh yeah, that's right, they don't actually know the lore. And going on with another lore break, they make Arien the big bad of the Witcher video games, and probably second or third big bad of the books. They make him all small and unintimidating and like soft-spoken, and that was bad enough. And then they made him gay. They made the big bad from the video games gay, and it's just so progressive to have two men kiss on screen. It's just really poorly done, everything that they did with Arien, and even worse what they did with Avallac'h, just making him even more wafy and not intimidating and not really having a presence. Avallac'h is not supposed to look physically intimidating like Arien is supposed to do. Arien's supposed to be like a beefcake, but Avallac'h, he's supposed to have that it factor, like the look in his eyes, the way he looks at you, he's like, oh, he's very dangerous. I don't want to mess with him. I don't want to know what he could come up with to hurt me with. Even though he's not physically intimidating, he has that intimidation factor. This little teenage boy does not have any sort of intimidation factor. He spends most of his time almost crying, like on the verge of crying, like his lip starts to tremble. That's like his default expression. There's a lot of default expressions like that. With the Lark, hers is just this pouty, angry, annoyed face that she has throughout the entire thing. She makes Morfydd Clark look like a good actress. That's how bad this actress is in the role. and she's one of the best actors in the show besides Michelle Yeoh and Minnie Driver. That's really not a good thing. That's really not a good thing. So Aroden and Avalok destroyed from the lore, and they're just so proud of themselves for making Aroden, you know, kiss a man that they think it will wash away all the stuff that they did with him. At this point in history, Aroden should be with the Ainel in their alternate universe with King Oberon, who should actually probably be like the main character of the show. King Oberon should be the main character at this time in history, and he's nowhere to be found. There's no King Oberon anywhere. And Aroden, instead of going off with Ainel peacefully going over to their other world to start a war against unicorns, he gets trapped in another reality when Baelor betrayed him, and he's alone, and he just happens to find, you know, a skull mask in the dirt. He's like, "Ooh, skull mask, I'm Wild Hunt now, I'm a Wild Hunt man," and he's alone though. So how could he be building the Wild Hunt, the Ainel, building Tirnalia, without King Oberon, without any of the Ainel? He's alone in this alternate reality, and it's not even the right alternate reality. They have no concept of setup and payoff. This is not going to set up Witcher Season 3 well at all. It doesn't make any sense what they're doing. And that's the bigger problem, is internally it can't even be consistent with itself. In talking about being internally consistent, Witcher Season 2 confirmed that it was the Elder Blood that helped create the first Witcher. And that's not the case in this show. As much as that is lore inaccurate, they had to be consistent with themselves. No, instead of Elder Blood, it's Monster Blood, everybody. That's what they needed to make the first Witcher, which is insane. No way that could possibly go wrong. Instead of, you know, making the real trial of the grasses with potions, mutations, scientific experimentation, they're just like, ooh, let's pump a shit ton of monster blood from a monster heart straight into the veins of a man. That's what they're gonna do. That's what they're gonna do. And rightfully so, it turns out horrifically bad. They can't even consistent with themselves. And later on, it's proven that he impregnates his girlfriend, the Lark, after becoming the Witcher, which is not consistent with the books or the TV show, because Witchers are sterile. Geralt in season 1 of The Witcher was sterile, so how did he knock her up? And then later on, they said that baby is the beginning of the Elder Bloodline. They created the Elder Bloodline. They said, oh, we needed a baby of monster of magic, a baby born of monster and magic. So, which is it, Netflix? Is it that the Elder Blood makes Witchers, or the Witcher makes Elder Blood? You can't have it both ways. That's a paradox. If there's no Elder Blood in the world yet, you can't make Witchers. And if there's no Witchers in the world yet, you can't make Elder Blood. It's kind of a cycle that they've just caught themselves in this immense contradiction. Neither of those two things should be true in the actual lore. They've just written themselves into a corner with the nonsense that they perpetuated in Blood Origin. That it's just, this is why you follow the lore, because the lore has been inspected for years and got all the kinks ironed out. And when you make up your own stuff, you make massive plot holes, massive mistakes like this, and it just turns into an utter and complete disaster. You can't stay consistent with yourselves. How could you be consistent with the books? This is just pathetic. Now I want to take this opportunity to talk about Merwin, who's actually the main villain of the series, as much as the writers and the show want you to think that it's actually Baelor, because she is a horrible person. Beyond her horrifically designed costumes, her armor from the end of the season is just really, really bad. She's just a poorly written character who's a monster. They keep trying to make her out to be a misunderstood villain who's actually justified in everything that she does, but she is a straight up monster. In the coup that she perpetuated with Baelor, which saw a monster come from the Jin's universe to kill all the kings of the north and, you know, slaughter them all, she slits the throat of one of her clan protectors, who is the sister of her boyfriend Fial. And later on, she's like, oh, do you want to stay at my side, boyfriend? And he's like, you fucking killed my sister. No, I don't want to join you. And she's so surprised about that. And the writers seem to take her side on it. She's not justified. And then she just keeps playing the victim. Like, oh no, Baelor's in charge now. I didn't get all the power that I wanted. Oh, poor me. It's like, no, you are a monster. She is just not a good person. And you want to know what she uses to justify all this? There's going to be an arranged marriage, something that happened to everybody at this point in time, men and women alike, and it was going to be an arranged marriage that would end a 1,000-year war. I don't care about your personal rights if you can end that much bloodshed. And just like the man in that arranged marriage, he wasn't getting a choice either. It wasn't about sexism. It was, oh wow, we've been fighting for too long. Too many people have died. Let's try to end this, you know? try to make some peace. And she would have actually become the empress of that as well, because the kingdoms would have united in peace. But she's like, no, I want ultimate power, but I don't want a man doing it with me. So I'm gonna slaughter everyone. She uses an arranged marriage as justification to murder her brother, murder the kings of the other kingdoms, and to slit the throat with her own hands of the man she loves. She's a monster. You cannot portray her in a positive, misunderstood victim light, as these writers constantly try to make it out to be. She deserved to die in gruesome fashion, and they still gave her some sort of heroic death at the end. It is a poorly written character that is so misunderstood by the writers that they think the audience will misunderstand her as well. No, we see her for what she is. She is the worst monster in the show. She's worse than Baylor. She's worse than the actual monsters from the other realities. Of all the characters in the show, she is the worst written. And besides the character writing, one of the worst writing things in the show was their lack of concept of space and time. Between the teleporting from the far north to the Skellige Isles, they jump back to the main kingdom in less than a day. It's just, they don't have the concept of space and time, because when Fjall is banished from his clan, he's basically in the kingdom of Sintra, and then he goes to the Isles of Skellige the same night that the Lark attacked those men in the bar and then got arrested. In that same amount of time, he stopped an assassination attempt, got banished for fucking the princess, and then sent over to the Skellige Isles and sailed across the ocean. In a couple hours. He did that in a couple of hours. That's not only the worst of it. When they're getting close, once there's the 7 heroes all together, because Minnie constantly has to say, hey, see, there's 4 of them now. Can you count to 4? There's 4 heroes in our little party now. Once there's 7 of them, they're apparently close enough to the gates when they undergo the Trial of the Grasses on Fjall that randomly Michelle Yeoh's character can, ride to the palace and say, hey, they're over there. Give me a bunch of money and I'll give them to you. And then she uses that money to buy sellswords, even though there's a bunch of soldiers that went with her that whole time, who were with her the whole time. Somehow she sneaks away, buys a bunch of sellswords, and comes back in a couple hours. The sellswords that she hired take the armor of the soldiers that she brought with her and killed. And that's how they sneak into the castle. And that's when we go for a full-on Star Wars. Star Wars, we got a Star Wars here. They make a rebellion to fight against the evil empire. And it starts off with the terrible speech by the Lark, who's still doing her annoyed face the whole time. That's the only expression she's physically capable of. At least Galadriel got happy on a horse once. Can't be said of the Lark. It's during this initial fight that Avalai goes to the Empress and says, hey, I found out that the monoliths, they can time travel too. Time travel is a cheap and lazy tool used by writers in most instances when they can't, write things well. It needs to be used sparingly in the Witcher universe. Only people with the strongest versions of the Elder Blood, such as Ciri, should be capable of time travel, and not even she can actually control it. She gets stranded in the multiverse in space and time, lost adrift in the endless sea of the worlds when she time travels for the one and only time, because it's difficult. She got lost, and she had to be brought back by some future scholars and a dreammancer to latch her back onto our reality. That's how that works, alright? Don't just randomly have monoliths capable of time travel. That can eradicate all sorts of continuity within the show. And in the end credit scene, we see Avalok time travel his boyish self to meet Ciri. So yeah, they're not having him be off with the Ein Al on the Wild Hunt. They're gonna have him time travel over the intervening centuries to just help Ciri. That's what they're gonna do. Alright, great. But it's at this point where the actual battle commences, and Fjall is the first Witcher. Witchers, they're given full control over their bodily functions to an extreme degree. They're very calm, collected, short, shallow breaths, slow heartbeat. They're in control of it all. And that's not the case for Fjall at all. He's just like a monster who's lost control of his thought. He's just a creature who wants to eat. He's just hungry, it sounds like. He wants blood, bloodlust, berserker. That's not what Witchers are supposed to be at all. And he doesn't use potions for his eyes to change color and all that stuff to happen. Forget the potions, he straight up hulks out. I'm not kidding. They rip off from Marvel now, the Incredible Hulk. At a certain point, when he's fighting the monster that Baylor got from the Jinn, he just straight up hulks out in front of everybody, growing few sizes, muscles growing bigger, skin stretching out, full-on Hulk transformation, and then he just stumbles upon a silver sword, and that's exactly what he needs to kill it. And it's just contrived, ripped off bullshit. And this is where we get another of those other ripoffs. The throne room looks near identical to the Game of Thrones throne room. just white. It's just really, really white. But it looks just like it did at the end of Season 8 when Daenerys died. The throne's broken, the glass behind it is all shattered, and she's wearing all black just like Daenerys as she's stabbed in the gut near the same place and bleeds out in the throne room. It's a near one-for-one ripoff of Daenerys' death for Princess Myrrin. It's near the exact same, and they make it like some sort of heroic moment, like she chooses to pull out the dagger and she's like, I'm in control of my destiny. And it's supposed to be some powerful feminist moment. But it's not, because she's a monster. She deserved to have her face stomped in for everything that she'd done. And as she's dying, Baelor is also dying, because at this point he's got chaos magic, but as soon as he gets out of the portal with the chaos magic, the two mages who are with the hero party, who don't really contribute anything to the hero party besides making Fial the first Witcher, they attack him. They figure out that they can channel their power into the monolith and blow it up, killing Baelor in the process. And it's sad, all the men die or are gravely injured, whereas all the women are totally fine at the end of it. After Baelor's dramatic death scene, the one mage is killed. The mage who's in a forced dyad, Star Wars ripoff there, with him is totally fine, just sitting there crying because she's upset that her forced dyad brother's dead. And that's how Baelor died, really overdramatic monolith explosion. And that's what causes the conjunction of the spheres, everyone. It's not a natural occurrence like it was in the books. It was just, oh, we blew up a monolith and shouldn't have. That's what caused the conjunction of the spheres. That's really, really pathetic, honestly. That's really not as cool as it just being a natural thing, a natural occurrence. And it's only the women left who can actually watch it. The one man who survived is blinded, so he can't actually watch it happen. So we get all these dramatic reaction shots from all the women. And it's during this that the Lark is forced to kill Fial, and their sudden love story with their horrible dialogue. And it's like, I was prophesied to kill a monster. I'm going to kill you now. And she stabs him again, just like Jon Snow did to Daenerys. So many ripoffs at this point, and she's pregnant at this point, so he can't kill her. We knew that wasn't gonna happen, so she kills him, and it's all sad and stuff. And that's when the final battle ends, and the conjunction of the spheres is explained in a voiceover. We see the sky crack a little, and then Mini Driver's like, that's the conjunction of the spheres, everyone, cool. Oh, there's some humans now, and now we're done. Yep, that's the conjunction of the spheres. I think the main event of this series took place over like 10 seconds. About 10 seconds of time. The conjunction of the spheres took about 10 seconds. And they talk more about the Elder Blood baby that they made together, the fusion of monster and magic, which is nonsense. And Ithling gives another final prophecy that doesn't make any sense and is whatever and dumb. And then we get the time travel end credit scene. And then the show is thankfully over. There is so much left on the cutting room floor. We knew at least 2 more episodes, maybe up to 6 more episodes were originally in this show, and there's just whole scenes missing. And I don't think it would have been any better even if we had them. Like the dwarf just randomly showing up, is like, oh, hey, I'm with you. Or the mage who was imprisoned by Baelor, suddenly not imprisoned by him, suddenly is with all the heroes, and he's like, oh yeah, I used the monolith. It's like, how did you get out of your cell to get to the monolith? Oh, no, we don't need to talk about that. It is rushed, it is poorly written. The added scenes of those other episodes would have just dragged this out even longer, and I doubt it would have made any more sense in the long run. But there's just so much wrong about this show. I cannot put it into human language how poorly written this travesty was, how horrendous this entire affair was. I've never seen a more poorly written show. I've never seen one that was as poorly constructed from a production standpoint. There's literally nothing of value besides the music in this entire story. If you want to know the true story of the Witcher lore, of the Witcher history, the conjunction of the spheres, the creation of the first Witcher, check out my lore series, the lore and history of the Witcher universe. I have those in a playlist here on my channel. Check those out if you want to know what this world should have looked like. But I've never given anything on this channel a below out of 2 out of 10, I believe. I'm going to be giving this a 0.5 out of 10, as in 0.5. And that 0.5 is only because of the music. That is the only redeeming factor about this entire show. It is the worst travesty to ever be done to a creative property. It is worse than The Timeless Children. It is worse than Rings of Power. And the Wheel of Time fans that I know say it's even worse than that disaster. It is woke intersectional garbage. Every decision made was for diversity and inclusion, and best female ever. The Lark is straight up told in a prophecy by Ithling at the beginning that she is the key to everything. She's the woman who is the key to everything. The Mary Sue with the magic knives, even though elves aren't magic, they're just generic pointy-eared humans, even though they should be angel-like and godlike at this point in history. She's the one who can use her magic knives. It's contrived bullshit. There's no logical connective tissue between each scene. The dialogue is flat at best, and I cannot believe that I wasted 4 hours of my life on something this bad. It is painful, and it would not be an unfair comparison to say that this broke the Geneva Convention's torture policies. This is worse than even The Last Jedi. I've never seen anything this bad or destroyed a franchise as thoroughly as this show did. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon.
Hey, yo, are you feeling what I'm doing up in here? Oh, I know you are. Do you miss all the good, compelling stories that we used to get back in Hollywood that they ain't putting down no more? I know you missing it. So check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues, baby. Book 1, Down in Flames. Book 2, Apocalypse Then. These are currently on sale. What are you waiting for? Get your hands on them. And we got Book 3, Kill the Dark, is coming down the pipeline. Just wait for all the good stuff that's dropping. You ain't gonna be disappointed, fam.